Minister, we give out in some years 80, I don't know what the latest figure is, 80 to 100 million euro in Section 481 film tax relief. It's supposed to be developing an industry capacity, but time and time again when workers who work on film productions take cases to the WRC or try to assert their rights under the Fixed Term Workers Act, the film producers who get Section 481 go into court and say we could have no possible employment relationship with these workers. This is not acceptable.
I want to thank the Deputy for raising this issue, and first of all I think everybody accepts that the Section 481 tax relief provides a 32% payable credit for eligible expenditure in film production in Ireland, which is very important. The expenditure has to be incurred in Ireland. That means the benefit of the jobs and the employment are here in Ireland. Historically, there was a situation some of the expenditure didn't have to be incurred in the state, so the benefit wasn't accruing to people in employment in the state, and that is now firmly the case. The scheme is intended to act as a stimulus to the creation of the industry, the indigenous film industry in the state, creating quality employment opportunities and supporting the expression of Irish culture. It is the expectation that the provision of such opportunities will be compliant with all applicable employment obligations, including legislative obligations and policies and procedures to ensure dignity at work. To grow the industry in Ireland, we want to see quality sustained employment and training opportunities in the sector. This is to be reflected in an undertaking of quality employment, which is required to be signed as part of the application process for the Section 481 application. I stress that there must be a quality of employment undertaking given in relation to that. There has been good progress over the last 2 years in relation to negotiations between employer and worker representatives in the sector. For example, in January 2001, a modernised crew agreement was introduced, which promotes good practice, regularise evolving work practice and provides for an industry pension scheme operating under the Construction Workers Pension Scheme. That's a very important development because many people may not be employed on a full-time basis. They can be moving from employer to employer, and that's very important that is now there, but that's only in place since the beginning of last year. A monitoring structure to oversee the operation of the scheme is included and is a commitment in developing the first work-life balance policy for the film and television industry. The agreement acts as a framework for the industry covering all grades except film construction. I understand that discussions are ongoing with a view to reaching agreement covering film construction workers, and department officials will continue to monitor progress in that regard.
Yeah, you see, because of the campaigning of film workers and issues I raised with the Minister, there was an undertaking brought in, okay, which requires compliance with the relevant employment legislation and specifically, probably the most important one, the Fixed Terms Workers Act, which means that people employed gain recognition of service. Under the operation of law, they can gain contracts of indefinite duration, even though the work is episodic. The employers are signing your declaration and then completely refusing to acknowledge those rights for workers. And so they're making fools of you, Minister. If you list it, so the head of SPY, who you say is negotiating an agreement, gave evidence in the court saying, I will give further evidence before the court there is no possible basis, having due regard to the realities of the sector, on which a relationship of employment can be said to have existed between the parties. This is on the basis of the clearly established industry norms and practices governing working arrangements in the sector, including the operation of 481. So the employers who get and sign that undertaking and get the film relief are saying we can't have employees. So how can you have quality employment and training when they're saying we have no employees?
Thank you. In relation to any specific workplace disputes, including the accusation that the application of any duty which befalls a company by law, the Workplace Relations Commission and the Labour Court are the organs of the state's tasked to deal with resolution of such matter. It is appropriate that any relevant claims should be referred to those bodies for adjudication. At the moment, there are no immediate plans in place in relation to amending the Section 481 legislation at this time. But what I will say, the film regulation provided the Minister for Tourism, Culture, Arts, Gaelic Sport and Media Australia has set conditions relating to the employment when issuing a certificate for a qualifying film. Regulation 4 of the Films Regulation stipulates that these conditions are to be met not just only by the producer company but also by the qualifying company, a designated activity company wholly owned by the producer company, which exists solely for the purpose of making one qualifying film. This is done on a film-by-film basis.
Minister, I mean, obviously, Minister O'Donoghue is more familiar with this, but you see, they're flouting it, right? That's what I'm telling you. They are flouting it openly. They're signing your undertaking, and then they're doing the exact opposite. And not only are they doing the exact opposite, they are saying that there's no basis on which they can have employees. Now, how can you give people tens and tens of millions of money which is purely on the basis of creating quality employment and training, and those same people say publicly, we can't have employees? Do you get the point? So there's no employees. There's no rights. They can hire and fire them at will, and nobody acquires any rights, even though the money you give them is conditional on them giving those rights and them signing an undertaking. And therefore they can blacklist people, they can victimise people, they can penalise people. Anybody they don't like doesn't get on the next film production and has absolutely no recourse because they hide behind this DAC. Even though the money isn't given to the DAC, the money is given by the government, public money given by the government to the film producer, who then says, I have no employees.
Minister to respond. Minister to respond.
Should a producer company or qualifying company fail to adhere to a condition or obligation specified in the certificate, the certificate granted by the department may be rendered invalid, and any credit claim may be subject to recoupment by the revenue under section 481. So it's important they must comply with that. There can be a serious financial, but maybe it hasn't happened because some of these regulations or new rules only came in last year, and the revenue are ultimately the final call on this in relation to it, and they have to be satisfied that all of these conditions are met before the taxpayer on the revenue on behalf of the taxpayer hands out that. And that company, the DAC, is required to remain in legal existence for at least 12 months post the completion of the production, and a number of cases have been taken to the WRC against production companies, and have recently failed due to the claims being undertaken outside the period allowable for such cases. So it's important the cases move quickly. There's only a legal obligation for the company to remain in existence for 12 months. So yeah, well, they need to take the company, but the company is in existence for 12 months after the completion of the production. That's the period of time the case must be taken.
Deputy Boyd Barrett, I think you're on your feet again, but we're running out of time for your next question.
Yeah.
33.
Minister, the question is very simple. Are you going to propose an emergency budget to deal with the cost of living crisis? Right? The cost of living crisis is hitting people at every single level. It's hitting them in terms of rents, accommodation, energy prices, the cost of normal consumer goods, and of course the value of their pay and income is falling commensurately with the rise of inflation. We can't wait till October for the government to seriously address all of these things, and we need an emergency budget to do that.
You won't get a chance to come in twice, Deputy, but maybe once. Minister.
Finally, question number 19. I understand this may have already been taken, maybe with number 19. And not which number is it actually, Deputy?
33. 33.
33.
Yeah. Vote was taken already, perhaps. Yeah, sorry.
Yeah, no, this has already been taken, and the question is proposing any tax or other measures to counteract the accelerating cost of living in all areas. In relation to the debate here this morning, the two PMBs this week and the motion yesterday, that has been the essence of about 4 debates in this Dáil this week alone. I can reiterate everything I said here for the last hour and a half, which dealt predominantly with these issues, but I think they're very much on the public record here in the last hour and a half, the response to this particular question.
It was grouped to 22, but 22 wasn't actually.
And number 22 was is the intent taken in relation to the indirect taxes.
Yeah, that's okay,
and finally, I will just say, to conclude, the Minister has indicated there have been 4 series of measures since budget last year up to this week in relation to the cost of living and helping people as a result of the cost of living issues, and there's no further measure planned until budget day.
You want a last word, Deputy?
Look, we got another report about rents going up, new rents going up, right, by what is it, 9%, and that's on top of rents that have effectively doubled over recent years, right? They are going out of control. We need measures to address that. You need to bring in rent controls because that is leading directly into people being homeless. The VAT reductions you've given are really pathetic given the increased energy costs people are facing, particularly for people with disabilities, single mothers, the vulnerable, the sick and so on, who are disproportionately impacted, low-paid workers. The measures you're taking go nowhere near what's necessary. And then people's pay is effectively being slashed as we speak. We need increases in pay and income.
Thank you.
And to conclude, and there's only a few seconds left, you mentioned people who are most vulnerable. The 390,000 people who are most vulnerable in relation to the fuel allowance, the combined payments they're getting from the government as a result of the budget and the recent increase is over €1,000 in each case. It's never intended to cover the entire cost of their fuel bill for the year, but it's a substantial contribution, and I think the government has extended the period and given increases, and when I add in the electricity charge as well, it's well over €1,000 for the people most affected, and we understand, and I think they understand, the people recognise the 2.1 billion we've put into this since budget day. People appreciate it is substantial, but it's never intended we can ameliorate all the effects of the Ukrainian war and other issues.
Now that